Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Crazy weekend of college football portal news, especially, I should mention, by the way, it was the first weekend of visits in the portal, right? We all know that, visits mostly happen on the weekend. And so this was the first big visit weekend. And so let's dive into some of the big news. Quick reminder, as always, we do have our CFB transfers pages on both Twitter and Instagram. At CFB transfers on Twitter and Instagram for all of your late breaking portal news. CFB transfers Instagram, CFB transfers on Twitter as well. Let's go ahead and start with what I believe is the biggest news of the weekend. Producer Matt's Auburn Tigers, baby. That is right. The freeze warning has hit the plains because I thought it was a very big, very important weekend for the Auburn Tigers. The big news, of course, comes Saturday morning. Jackson Arnold, the former Oklahoma quarterback, does end up committing to Auburn. Couple really interesting thoughts here when it comes to this recruitment. First of all, look, we know that things did not go well for Jackson Arnold this year. Started the season, got benched, etc. Finishes with 1,400 passing yards, 444 rushing yards, 15 total touchdowns. But the bottom line is, I don't think people realize quite how dire the situation was at Oklahoma on offense. Okay, I am a Jackson Arnold truther. I believe that he just got such a raw deal. And then, by the way, when things went sideways, he was the one who took all the blame. First of all, Oklahoma, 5 new starters on the offensive line. Oh, we all knew that could be a potential problem. But what I don't think people realize is just how many injuries there were on the Oklahoma offensive line, or in the wide receiver room at Oklahoma. Okay, so I went back and looked it up. These numbers are insane. And by the way, a lot of these guys are hitting the portal from Oklahoma. But that wide receiver room was as banged up as anybody's in college football. I'm just going to read you some stats that I think are going to be stunning to you when you actually hear them, okay? So Oklahoma last year, in 2023, they win 10 games. Dylan Gabriel's their quarterback, okay? Here were some of their best wide receivers who returned this year. Nick Anderson, who's actually currently in the portal, was a freshman All-American in 2023, had 38 catches, 10 touchdowns. You know how many catches Nick Anderson had this year because of injury? 0. So a guy that caught 10 touchdowns as a freshman last year has 0 total catches as a sophomore this year, takes a red shirt, is going to transfer, and who knows where he's going to end up. Jaleel Farouk in 2023 had 45 catches. He had 3 in 2024 because of injury. Andrell Anthony had 25 catches in 2023. He had 1 in 2024, okay? So you go 3 guys that basically had over 100 catches collectively, combined for 4 this season. That is what Jackson Arnold was dealing with, and that's why I am a Jackson Arnold truther. I believe in him. I'm glad, and by the way, we talked about Auburn a lot on the College Football Betting Show and this show all fall long. Listen, I don't think they're that far off. They finished 5-7. They beat A&M. We all saw that game. But remember, they were in control against Oklahoma. They had Oklahoma beat until Peyton Thorne threw a pick 6 late in the fourth quarter. They had Missouri beat. They were up double digits going into the fourth quarter. Don't win that game. And so that Auburn team, I'm not sitting here saying they should have been 10-2 and in the college football playoff conversation, but they weren't that far off. And it is also worth noting, by the way, with Auburn, I think this is sort of important as well. Most of the best talent on that roster is super young. It was funny. Producer Matt and I were talking after the show on Thursday. The freshman all SEC teams came out. Auburn had like 6 guys on the freshman all SEC team. Jay Crawford, DeMarcus Riddick, and oh, by the way, Cam Coleman, who is as freaky of a receiver as it gets. So Auburn has a lot of young talent. They needed that bridge quarterback. We think that Deuce Knight, the 5-star, is the future. It is interesting because we thought the bridge quarterback might be a kid. Producer Matt, is it Walker White is the name? Is that the name of the kid that we thought was going to be the guy and then transferred? That was kind of a funny story because Auburn did put out a graphic. Quarterback room is loaded with Deuce Knight, the 5-star, with Jackson Arnold, and with Walker White. Then, of course, Walker White hit the portal a few hours later. But listen, I actually really do like Jackson Arnold. By the way, you feel bad for Mississippi State. We'll get to them in a second because early in the portal cycle, it felt like Jackson Arnold was going to end up there. He, of course, remember, played under Jeff Lebby, the head coach. And you thought it was going to end up being Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby goes to Mississippi State as the head coach. Jackson Arnold hits the portal. You think it's going to be Mississippi State. Instead, he goes to Auburn. By the way, little historical note. Remember the last time Auburn had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback out of the transfer portal? Chose Auburn over Mississippi State. Is Jackson Arnold Cam Newton 2.0? Okay, I'm being a little sarcastic here, but the point is, history is repeating itself. Jackson Arnold, I am a believer. By the way, you got a nice little piece to join him on Saturday afternoon. And this one tugs at my heartstrings a little bit. Darrell Robinson from the University of Connecticut. Listen, we haven't talked enough about UConn. Jim Mora, 8 wins this season. By the way, you know who they're playing in their bowl game? How about the North Carolina Tar Heels? Bill Belichick coming back to college, the first game of the Bill Belichick era, even though he will probably be at the game, but not on the sidelines. It is against the UConn Huskies, but I bring it up because Darrell Robinson, they really had a two-headed monster. Darrell Robinson, Cam Edwards, both guys rushed for about 750, 760 yards. Cam Edwards had 7 touchdowns. Darrell Robinson had 8. Darrell Robinson averaged 7 yards per carry. Well, Darrell Robinson hits the portal, and he ends up at Auburn. Listen, I just think it's one of those underrated moves that is really going to pay dividends for Auburn. Like we said, the receiver room is stacked. Obviously, the running back room needs some reinforcements, with some of the guys that they're losing after this season. But I'm just here to say, you got to feel really good if you're an Auburn fan. By the way, apparently, as we're recording here, Auburn has landed Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech, an offensive tackle. So listen, I don't know the depth chart as well as producer Matt, but you talk to people who know Auburn well. They said, look, all these, pieces are great. Jackson Arnold, Darrell Robinson, you need to upgrade the offensive line. This is the first step, Xavier Chaplin. And I'm telling you this, man, again, I haven't looked at all the schedules and broken it all down. I know Auburn's obviously going to have a tough road schedule. They'll play next year at Oklahoma, at whoever. But you talk about a team that if they get competent quarterback play could make a big leap. I think Auburn's won. They're 5-7, easily could have won 3-4 more games. So Auburn gets a big weekend. Jackson Arnold, Darrell Robinson, and Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech on the O-line. Let's keep it going. And let me say this. Talks of Brian Kelly's demise maybe a little bit exaggerated because LSU quietly had a monstrous weekend in the college football transfer portal. Listen, I'll give Brian Kelly this, and we talked about it when the portal opened, okay? Because when the portal opened, the big story at LSU was you don't have Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood was the 5-star, number 1 player in America, flips to Michigan. And the big question was, what were you going to do next? Now, as I said at the time, there was thought that Darian Mensah, the transfer from Tulane, right down the road from Baton Rouge, I've done the drive from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. It's 25, 30 minutes. But there was thought that Darian Mensah was going to end up at LSU. He instead goes to Duke. But I bring it up because I actually like what Brian Kelly did. So Michael Van Buren ended up being the starting quarterback at Mississippi State for most of the year. As a true freshman, he was the number 1 recruit in their 2024 class. He comes in to back up Blake Shapen. Blake Shapen gets hurt pretty early on in the process. This kid, Michael Van Buren, gets thrown into the fire. Now, I actually feel bad for Mississippi State because I think the kid entered the portal because it was so obvious that they were recruiting Jackson Arnold to replace him. They don't get Jackson Arnold. This kid ends up in the portal, and now he's at LSU. Why is that noteworthy? It is because Garrett Nussmeier is also coming back. That to me is significant because you have your 4th, 5th year guy in Garrett Nussmeier next season, but you also, and I think this is important, you have that quarterback right behind him that has already played in the SEC. And in a perfect world, Michael Van Buren doesn't have to play much. It's almost next year becomes the redshirt year that he should have had this year, but instead it doesn't work out. Now you have a veteran of the SEC to back up Garrett Nussmeier, and you are set at the quarterback position for 3-4 years to come if everything works out well. So Michael Van Buren from Mississippi State commits. Also, as you can see on the screen, Barian Brown. This is a big name, and I know a lot of listeners of this show know the name Barian Brown. Was one of the highest rated commits in the history of Kentucky football, was a wide receiver, former top 100 recruit, had offers from everywhere, goes to Kentucky. By the way, as a true freshman, played with Will Levis. And by the way, I know Will Levis is just taking monster strays right now after the game and the season he's had with the Titans. But as a true freshman, 50 catches 3 seasons ago, 43 catches last year. The numbers this year completely fall off a cliff as Kentucky's pass game falls apart. I think Barian Brown's a monster. I think he is an NFL type wide receiver. And so LSU now has a reinforcement at wide receiver. They lost CJ Daniels to the portal. Kyron Lacy's going to go pro. This is a big one. This is a good one for LSU. Also add Jakeem Jackson from Florida in the defensive back room. And I would add this too, and I think this is kind of an important one from the LSU perspective. Jamari Butler. Okay, so Jamari Butler, Nebraska had a top 20 defense. Well, Jamari Butler was one of their best players. Finished this season 7.5 TFLs, 2 sacks. One of my big complaints all season long with LSU. Do they have the guys on the defensive line? They just haven't had the dudes that you need. Well, this kid is going to be a difference maker. Good for LSU for closing the deal. Remember, Nebraska's defensive coordinator goes to Florida State. There was a lot of thought this kid was going to follow him. Not so much. Really quickly, the other big note out of the portal on Sunday, or over the weekend, I should say. And by the way, we're recording. It's about 7:30 Eastern time. So don't yell at me if news breaks right after we get off air. But there was big news at Ole Miss where basically they're just recruiting off the Arkansas roster right now. Okay. And I know there's a lot of Arkansas fans that listen to this show. You know, my buddy John Neighbors, who I love, he was joking on Twitter. Like, I think there's a mole inside our facility that's letting Lane Kiffin know who wants to enter the portal, because over the course of the weekend, Friday and Saturday, 3 different Arkansas Razorbacks ended up committing to Ole Miss. And by the way, there's a bigger picture conversation about, I never thought you had to bring Sam Pittman back. I think morale in the program is low. He needed major surgery. He's literally physically not capable of doing the job right now. Well, it's costing him because some of their best players are in the portal. A couple of the names that went from Arkansas to Ole Miss, Patrick Kudus, many believe is one of the best offensive linemen in the portal. And what's noteworthy about this was a kid that took a red shirt after 4 games this year. And I don't know all of the details of the story, but basically promised the Arkansas coaching staff, I will be back in 2025, but let me take my red shirt right now. Takes his red shirt, dips, ends up at Ole Miss. Oh, by the way, defensive back Jalen Braxton ends up at Ole Miss. Luke Haas ends up at Ole Miss. He was a player that was very highly coveted, was supposed to take a trip to Alabama. 26 catches this past season, 3 touchdowns. He hits the portal. Ole Miss gets their guys. And man, oh man, oh man. I just, if you're an Arkansas fan, you got to be frustrated because Ole Miss just basically hijacked your entire roster, or at least the guys that you wanted anyway. So that was the big news from the portal. Again, we'll be covering this stuff over the course of December. There's more big news to come. I think as the college football playoff ramps up, you know, as teams lose next week, and I think players are going to hit the portal, whether it's Texas, Ohio State, whoever ends up losing, Tennessee, guys are going to hit the portal. By the way, we all saw the Quinn Ewers buzz over the course of the last few days, so it'll be interesting. But remember, for all of your late-breaking college football portal news, make sure to follow our portal page, CFB Transfers on Instagram, CFB Transfers on Twitter as well.